القادم. دكتور Mrs. Leela, can you hear me? Leela?
Hello. Oh, yes, yes. Hello.
Hello. Hi, nice to meet you. Hi, nice to see you. Okay, I'm really surprised to see you again. Okay, a couple of times.
Nice to see you too.
Nice to see you today. We are really thankful to accepting our invitation to be with us in this conference or this seminars. It's really great to see you and as well to hear from you. I hope as well to share in your experience to our audience today. One of the most important with Leela, okay, to be honest, she's speaking 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 languages, okay. I hope next time
except Arabic.
Learn Arabic. I'm speaking Arabic. We want your presentation next time in Arabic. ما شاء الله ليلى تتكلم أكثر من 7 لغات ما شاء الله، بين يعني إجادة تامة وإجادة يعني هي حقيقة عندها كثير من الخبرات. Sorry, I'm gonna explain it in Arabic to CV and then we give you the phone, okay. تتكلم أكثر من لغة وتمنيت منها أنها حقيقة تتعلم اللغة العربية وأيضا نسمع من لغة. هي طبعا حقيقة مترجم ومحرر العديد من البرامج الدولية في الرياضة مع عديد من الاتحادات الدولية حول العالم وأيضا على مستوى محلي في دولتها الأصل وفي الدول الأخرى. لديها الكثير حقيقة من الخبرات في هذا المجال. أيضا حصلت على العديد من الجوائز الدولية وكذلك الدعم لعدد من البرامج الدولية حول العالم. لديها أيضا حقيقة على المستوى المهني مستشارة مستقلة في الرياضة والمساواة بين الجنسين، وعملت في اليونسكو واليونيسيف وعدد من البرامج حقيقة الدولية. كانت مستشارة أيضا في الإرث والاستدامة الثقافية في عدد من الاتحادات واللجان الأولمبية من ضمنها اللجنة الأولمبية السعودية. أيضا عندها كثير من الجهود على مستوى اتحاد الطاولة السريلانكي وعدد من المنظمات الرياضية العالمية. أدارت أيضا وطورت عدد من برامج الشباب على المستوى الأولمبي والمستوى الأوروبي. أدارت مشاريع أيضا لاتحاد تنس الطاولة الدولي. عملت في إدارة عدد من البرامج حقيقة المرتبطة في الفنون الرياضية وعدد من المنشآت الرياضية. متحدثة في العديد من المؤتمرات والندوات الدولية. عندها حقيقة الكثير من الخبرات وأيضا الإصدارات حقيقة والجهود سواء على المستوى العلمي، عندها عدد من الأوراق العلمية المنشورة أيضا، وعندها حقيقة دور كبير في عدد من المدارس والمنظمات المهتمة بالرياضة والرياضة النسائية وحقوق المرأة في ممارسة الرياضة. سعيدين اليوم بأنها تجد معنا. We are welcoming you and we are really happy to be with us. And is really interested to hear from you about your experience. It's a great experience. We wanted to share it with us. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Floor is yours. Okay, Colleen.
Thank you, Dr. Fawaz. Was that an introduction of me?
Thank you.
So I won't introduce myself anymore, just to say that I am very happy, and thank you for the invitation. I am a former table tennis player and I have worked in international sport for a very long time, and I'm a member of the International Working Group for Women and Sport. So I'm happy to briefly speak, I think I have 15 minutes, to talk about something that I have been passionately interested in and worked for a long time, and in sport culture, and that is girls and women in physical activity, physical education, and sport. We are now all living in a post-COVID era. We have experienced across cultures what it was like to be hit by this health crisis. As we saw across cultures, that women and girls were affected in different ways to men and boys. I see two positive outcomes of COVID. You have to always see the positive in anything negative. And the first is that the undeniable importance of physical activity and sport. I don't know about you, but I was very stressed about not moving, about not being able to do the sport that I usually do, of getting even more, fatter, putting on weight, becoming totally unfit, and or developing a non-communicable disease like diabetes. I mean, not 20 anymore. I'm turning 61 today. So it's now important for me to also think about these things. And the COVID area was, that era was really frightening. And this is before I even knew that being overweight and unfit could lead to serious forms of COVID and even death. The second thing the good thing is that the pandemic has also shown the extraordinary strength of women and girls, women as frontline workers, doctors, nurses, mothers, teachers, all having to adapt and contribute in so many different ways and difficult ways. The pandemic also highlighted examples of the value of female leadership, and this is something that we should follow in sport leadership in the future. So let me share my screen with you. Can you see my screen? Yes. I can't see it.
Yes, we can. Yes.
No, sorry.
Just open your files.
Okay, this one.
Okay, great.
And where are we now? This one, right? Okay, sorry. Yes, so we know that Saudi Arabia is trying very hard now through Vision 2030 to include girls and women in PE and sport. And this is great. And keeping this in mind, and as you are an audience of academics and sport officials, I thought that I would speak about two topics. One of my most recent experiences in research, which may be interesting for you from a global perspective, as well as a cultural perspective. And second, an education program that I was involved in Japan, which was part of the Japanese legacy for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. So the research program was with UNESCO. UNESCO, as you may know, through the Kazan Action Plan, has established a global observatory for women and sport in Lausanne, where I live. And for that, we did a lot of research. I was part of the research team. And what was interesting was that we looked at sport, PE and PA together. So this was a very interesting experience, because even though these three domains are experienced differently, we found that there is still a long way to go to have equal opportunities in sport, PE and PA on every continent, for men and girls, but I'm talking mostly from the female perspective. So the research leaves no room for doubt. The WHO the World Health Organization has described physical inactivity as a pandemic that seriously impacts health and longevity, with women having less access to PA and PE than men in most countries globally. So it's not just one country that is in this, the research shows that in every country, this can be a problem. So some of the things that we found was the lack of policy implementation in over half the countries with a national policy. So everyone says, we are going to do something, we sign agreements, we have policies, but it doesn't get implemented. In adolescence, almost 1 in 3 countries has a gender gap between girls and boys in physical activity, which disadvantages girls. Older populations across the world are aging, and there is a lot of evidence for the importance of PA at every stage of life. The overall gender gap in physical inactivity levels has widened, putting women at greater risk. Because also of the language difference and stuff, I put some things that you can read, some statistics and things that we found, but I won't read all that out. UNESCO currently reports from a physical education perspective that girls are still more likely than boys never to set foot in a classroom, despite the tremendous efforts and progress that has been made over the past 20 years. So gender inequality shows girls are disadvantaged in access to education, particularly at secondary level, and have higher adolescents dropout figures. So we have to remember all this. This is good information when we are planning projects or education programs. Asia has the lowest score on gender equality in physical education, followed by Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East. Africa sits somewhere in the middle, below Europe. And there is some very good work being done in North America and Oceania that we can also, learn from. So what are some of the reasons for this? The lack of status with other subjects. Everything, parents, people think around the world that everything else is more important than PE and PA. So you don't get enough time, you don't get enough good places to do physical education and physical activity, the facilities, the funding is cut. When you don't have enough money, you put it in something else and not in PE. A curriculum that is dominated by competitive games. There's football, sorry about that. But there are also other things that would be better to use to get girls and women involved and to keep them in sport and physical activity. Indigenous sports, for example, community sports that bring the community together, that bring the family together, because COVID also showed that being together as a family, being able to do physical activity as a family was important. So this should really be given some importance in the post-COVID programs. We found that school to community sport, PA links are very poor, especially for girls. So if the girls are not given the necessary tools and knowledge in school, they will never know how to sustain active lifestyles in later years. And of course, there are other intersecting things like disability, poverty, cultural diversity, and these are also some of the biggest challenges. So I put in a little bit about Saudi Arabia in the sense that Saudi Arabia has introduced physical education in schools for girls, which is fantastic, but this was in 2017. So we need to research this more. We need to know how this is going. And that kind of information we couldn't find when we were doing our research. So that is something that young researchers should really do. And also COVID, what happened after any progress that was made may have, diminished. So we need to do more research. And also from a global perspective on physical education, the data that we have is old. The last World Survey of Physical Education was in 2013. So global data available on PE is old and insufficient. And Asia, the Caribbean, and the Middle East were identified as having the most need of support for data gathering. So you see that there is a lot that young researchers can do. From the international sport perspective and sport for development, things have changed. We will be told that at the Olympic Games there's almost 50% participation, which is good. However, we found very serious gaps in terms of women's and girls' participation and their contribution to all aspects of elite sport. There is still a lot to do to understand the female body. Because sport, as you know, was created by men for men. So very little understanding. Women got in there, they're doing, but we are not quite sure that we are doing the right thing. Very low female representation on boards at international sport level. So no women presidents, vice presidents, their voices are not heard. And if their voices are not heard, nothing is going to change. Sport culture can have a lot of harassment and abuse. And we have had big examples of the USA gymnastics or African football, just to name a couple. And that is something that still needs to be addressed very seriously. And lack of women in coaching professions. So this runs through PE, PA, and sport. The human resources, lack of women in these positions. And lack of visibility of women's sport in mainstream media. And of course, other unaddressed emerging themes such as the impact of COVID. We identified 5 recurring key themes running through these 3 domains. And that was lack of female representation in sport governance, teaching, and coaching, a pandemic-like spread of gender-based violence and harassment, and the need for better safeguarding for the protection of not only girls and women, but also boys and men. I'm sure that whatever we do for girls and women to improve their lives will only improve life for boys and men. Gender inequality in disadvantaged and marginalized groups, further exacerbated by other complex intersecting issues such as disability, war, political instability, restrictive cultural barriers. Gender gaps in girls' and women's participation across the lifespan, starting in the school system. And of course, harmful, stereotyping, negative medical myths, etc., and discrimination in the media. So one of the takeaways of this, one of the key takeaways from this research for me is that PE and sport should actually work together and not separately. We see that everyone's doing something, in its own field, but there is no collaboration. And this brings me to the SDGs, because we have also working for the SDGs through partnerships. And this is, I think, where we should connect these three domains to work together, to pool resources, to pool knowledge and human resources as well. So in the midst of the pandemic, we celebrated 25 years of the Beijing Platform for Action. At that occasion, Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany at the time, summed it up as follows: 25 years after the Beijing Declaration, equality should be a given, but we still have a long way to go. Get on board, let's work together to really target the Beijing goals, the faster the better. But what does it mean, equality? And what does it mean, gender? These terms are understood in different ways in different cultures. So we need to have more education on these topics, more conversations, more research. And it is the belief, and it is this belief that led to the gender and sport module that I will speak about briefly now, that we delivered at the University of Tsukuba in Japan as part of the legacy for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Now, gender equality, women's sport was not included there. It was something that was added later to the program because we thought it was necessary, and it was fantastic. And it's a module that exists that we can share, we can implement in any part of the world. This course provided, those are my last batch students, the ones I worked with. This course provided an opportunity for Japanese students to learn more about different aspects of the culture of international sport, and for international students to consider the differences and nuances in culture of the sport world within Japan and compare with their own. This course aimed also to create more research about women and sport and to add knowledge from different parts of the world. So some of the lectures covered diverse topics, and one of the main aims of the course was to increase, as I said before, evidence-based research. So introduction to gender studies. What is gender? What is equality? I'm asking this question because this was asked at a world conference once and nobody could quite answer it well. What is the difference between equity and equality? What are stereotypes? So these were some of the things that we looked at and we learned through this course. We studied women in the Olympic movement. History, as you know, is not her story. And studying the history of women and sport in the international sport movement is very, very inspiring, and there is still a lot to do. History of the women and sport movement, UN policies, maybe Sarah, who's coming after me, will speak a little more on that, like CEDAW or Title IX in the United States, IOC targets and recommendations, the Brighton Declaration of the International Working Group for Women in Sport. So all this is knowledge that we need to give to young people. And then we studied Japanese women in sport, perspectives from historical anthropology. Saudi women are beginning to write their own history now, and their stories must be written down to inspire future generations of Saudi girls and boys. I had the pleasure of meeting some of you fantastic athletes and role models like Lama Al-Fawzan and Dalma Malas and Reha Muharrak, who have made history for Saudi Arabia. Other topics were stereotypes, peer harassment, doping and abuse in sport, all from a gender perspective, all looking at it from a women and girls perspective. Sport management, women in leadership, coaching, mentoring, women in sport marketing and sponsorship, sport for development and gender. Sport for development and peace is now a growing field, but we still find that and they're all talking about women and, you know, doing stuff for girls and women, but the coaches are mostly male. So this is also something that has to be addressed, and we studied this in the class. Sustainable development goals and gender empowerment. Jacob's talked about it a lot. There is a standalone SDG, which is gender equality, and this should run through all the 17, because you can't have no poverty without involving the women. You can't have partnerships by leaving the women out. You can't have structures, proper governance structures, if you leave the girls and women out. So gender equality should run through all these SDGs, and that is something we try to look at as well.
It's really interesting. Just we have like an hour and 1 minute, okay?
Yes, I have 1 minute. Okay, so this was something that we did, and I think this is really important because this knowledge has to be given to young people in universities, in schools, wherever. That's good. That's already good enough. As I said before, I'm a member of the International Working Group for Women and Sport, and we will have, I would like to invite all of you there. We have the World Conference. It's every 4 years, and it's going to be in Auckland, New Zealand, 14th to 17th of November. So please join us either virtually or come and join us there. It was postponed a few times, but it's happening now. And I have a little film to show you if we have time. If we don't have time, maybe you can show it during the break or something.
Can we leave it at the end of the session? Okay.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Thank you very much for your.
Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to say happy birthday for you. Okay. Today, that's great for us. Okay. To be the birthday of yours. Okay. And if you can allow me just to explain the session for the Arabic speaker and the Arabic audience. حقيقة ليلى ذكرت مجموعة من الأمور اللي هي مرت عليها، وكانت من الأمر اللي بدأت فيه قالت إنها كانت هي لاعبة رياضية في تنس الطاولة، ودائما لديها يعني هاجس دائم حول عدم ممارسة المجتمع للرياضة، وكانت دائما تحس بأنها دائما عليها مسؤولية أنها تساعد المجتمع على ممارسة الرياضة. تحدثت حقيقة عن المرأة وأنها دائما تكون في الصفوف الأمامية لكثير من مناحي الحياة، تكون كمعلمة كممرضة، وقالت أن العديد من الوظائف اللي يمكن المرأة تكون لها دور فعال وكبير فيها. وأكبر دليل كان على ذلك ما حدث أثناء الجائحة، والدور اللي قامت فيه الكثير من النساء حول العالم كان دور فعال وإيجابي في كثير من الجوانب. تحدثت عن السعودية ورؤيتها الجديدة، وأن لديها جهود كبيرة في مجال الرياضة النسائية ودعم النساء والسيدات في أنهم يكونون جزء من تطور والقفزة النوعية اللي قاعد تحصل في المملكة في المجال الرياضي. تكلمت أيضا عن برامج اليونيسيف ورياضة المرأة وما تقدمه من دعم في كافة المجالات للرياضة النسائية، وتكلمت أيضا عن عدد من الجوانب كان في وجهة نظرها أيضا من أهم الأمور اللي أعاقت الدور الكبير للمرأة اللي هو ضعف السياسات الخاصة بالسيدات في ممارسة الرياضة. استعرضت طبعا أيضا وش الأهداف الاجتماعية والاقتصادية اللي تأتي كجزء من تطوير أو الاهتمام برياضة السيدات أو المرأة. استعرضت أيضا بعض النتائج المرتبطة بما حدث أثناء الجائحة، وأيضا بعض الأمور المرتبطة بالأهداف. تكلمت أيضا عن برنامج سبورت فور تومورو، وهذا يعني كان أحد البرامج اللي هي كان لها دور كبير ومشاركة فيه مع عدد من الطلاب وعدد الدارسين في حول العالم، وهذا أحد البرامج اللي كانوا له. Thank you, Lila, for what you're saying. Okay, and just we will leave the question and comment at the end of the session to give more time for the other speaker and to share all the information for the others. So thank you very much.